Now we are going to now study about the Bible-Presbyterian faith, all right? The Bible-Presbyterian faith. Now we are a Bible-Presbyterian church. This lesson is also very important for those who are intending to take up church membership, because you are going to join a Bible-Presbyterian church. So you must know what church you are joining. Why we are Bible Presbyterians. For those who are joining, I guarantee you, all right? Suddenly a lot of heads look up. I guarantee you that in the interview with the board, this question will surely be asked, all right? So we will ask you, what are the distinctives of the Bible Presbyterian faith? Distinctives means the key differentiating beliefs, all right, that makes us different from Presbyterians. You cannot not know that, because you are joining a church. Means you are saying that I agree and I fully subscribe to the church's beliefs. That is why I'm joining the church, right? So the Bible Presbyterian faith. Now, why are we Bible Presbyterians? Because some Presbyterians, when they come to our church, when they visit our church, they are surprised, all right, by certain things that we hold to, because it is not typical of Presbyterians. So there are a few things. But first and foremost, let's understand the history, all right, the history. Now, if you look at your BBK books, there's a description about the BP movement in the first paragraph. But let me try and give you a pictorial view. So those of you who are members already, you also must know your history, all right? If people ask you. Now, first, there was the PCUSA, all right? PCUSA stands for the Presbyterian Church of United States of Australia, United States of America, right? That was the first body form, all right? That was formed in 1783, all right? Thereabout 1783. So there was always the Presbyterian Church. Last week we studied. There was the New Testament Church, correct? The New Testament Church. Is the picture still here? Oh, no more. The New Testament Church. Then the Roman Catholic Church corrupted the New Testament Church. And then along the way in the 1500s, there was the Reformation. So the church reformed the church back to what the New Testament Church was. And that is the Presbyterian system, the elders system. We learned that. Maybe I make sure that you understand this, all right? So there was the New Testament Church. The New Testament Church. Then the Roman Catholic Church corrupted the New Testament Church. Then there's the Reformation. The Reformation brought the church back to the New Testament Church. And it has to be called something. This is Roman Catholic. So what do we call? So they were the Reformed Church. Then Reformed Church is really the Presbyterian system, as we saw in the New Testament, the ruling of elders. And then after that, all right, after that, it is then when the Baptist system was formed. So it's after the Presbyterian system, and so on, all right? So now then we have in 1783, the PCUSA, a body was formed, an official body, the Presbyterian Church body. But then in 1936, there was a split from the Presbyterian USA. Why? Because look at your BBK books, all right? Presbyterian Church of USA was infiltrated by liberals and modernists. Now, liberals are people, are so-called Christians, professing Christians, who make experience more important than doctrines. All right, so, well, if you experience something, then, well, doctrines are not so important. What did you experience? And also, to them, as a result, they don't believe in absolute truth. No absolute truth. Well, how you interpret the Bible, and especially by your experience, that is your truth. So the liberals, basically very liberal in their interpretation of scriptures. And then we have the modernists. Modernists are similar. Now, all these people, they put science above doctrines. If science cannot prove something in the Bible, then, for example, miracles, resurrection, virgin birth, then these things are not true because science cannot prove it. And science say it is wrong. So science is always correct. Then these things in the Bible are stories. That is all. All right, so there's an example of modernists. We'll study more about them in the next chapter, God willing. All right, so because of all this corruption in the PCUSA, all right, the body of Presbyterian Church, a group broke away and formed the OPC, Orthodox Presbyterian Church. So a new body was formed. They obeyed scriptures, come out from among them, touch not their unclean things, and I will receive you. All right, you'll be my people. So they obeyed scriptures and they went out, separated. Right? So biblical separation was the reason why OPC was formed. Please remember that. Now, but very soon, so this was started by Gresham Machen, all right? Gresham Machen, right? Very famous Presbyterian person, very orthodox. Now, but very soon in 1937, there was a split from OPC, a group split from OPC. It was led by Carl McIntyre, all right, led by Carl McIntyre. Now, and he formed what is the movement is Bible-Presbyterian movement, all right, the Bible-Presbyterian Church. So that is our roots. Now, why did Carl McIntyre break away from OPC? Now, there are three key reasons, and this is where the distinctives come in. Look at your BBK books, all right? Now, OPC, they support only missionaries who are Presbyterians. Now, Carl McIntyre did not agree. He felt that we should support all missionaries as long as they are fundamentalists, right? God's money can be used to support any work. OPC says only Presbyterian missionaries will be supported. Now, what are the fundamentals of the faith? You must know. Well, as long as they believe in the deity of Christ, the virgin birth of Christ, the bodily resurrection of Christ, the blood atonement of Christ, and the infallibility of scriptures. These are the key fundamental things that the Christians were fighting back then. So please know, it's at that time what they were fighting for as fundamentals. You cannot compromise on this. They say if groups adhere to this, then there is no reason why we cannot support them. Now, please also understand this. People can say that they believe in all this. All the website shows, many churches show this website. But there's what they say and what they put up must be tested with what they practice. All right, what they practice. So they are not saying that as long as they state that we will support. The test was whether they themselves practice biblical separation. Means they say we believe in this, but we support and we work with modernists, with liberals. Then you cannot say that you believe in the deity of Christ. All right? So when we, for example, today, when we support a mission work that is a non-Presbyterian mission work, non-Bible Presbyterian work, we don't just look at, well, you believe in the fundamental of the faith and we support you. That was not their attitude. Do they really practice biblical separation? Because that is the test of your beliefs. So that's the first thing we must realize. So don't say that, oh, then let's go support anybody who say that they are fundamentalists. They must be tested. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing about this first distinctive is also this. They are not saying that we will go out and support any fundamentalist as priority. What they simply meant was, yes, of course, we are Presbyterian churches. Our priority is to support the Presbyterian churches missionary. All right? And if there is a need in some other areas, all right, we are also willing to support them. So don't have this impression that they are saying that we must support all. They had priorities, but they are simply saying, we cannot say that if certain groups, for example, maybe a Baptist group, all right, they took a clear stand for the faith, and they were ostracized, and they were cast out of their body, and they have no support. They are genuine. We are not saying that we will not support them, all right? The Presbyterian churches have done that. for example, Carrie Pandan as well. Right? So we assess that. We cannot say only Presbyterian. So that was one issue. So when you ask, this is the issue. But you must understand what it means, all right? Don't ask, Pastor, then why are we not supporting all these Baptist congregationalist work? Because our priority is always also to the Bible-Presbyterian movement first, okay? Now, so that's one. Now, then the second one is this. Amillennialism. Amillennialism. Now, what is amillennialist? So, now most Presbyterian are millennialists. Means they don't believe that is the literal 1,000 years of Christ ruling on earth, the millennium, all right? So you know your eschatology. So this is not meant to be in-depth study, all right? Later on we'll study in-depth of some of this. But when we study eschatology in BBK, so you know when, so this is the church now. Now, when will Christ come? And last week we learned to rapture the church, all right? Where all true believers will be raptured, all right, into heaven. The dead bodies will also, the dead believers will also be bodily resurrected and raptured, all right? So when Christ come and receive the church, all right, his second silent coming. Now what will happen after that is then comes the 7 years of tribulation. We read that in prophecies. And at the end of these 7 years, we read in Revelation Christ's actual physical coming with the believers, and he will cast Satan into the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. Right? Now, please turn your Bibles to Revelation chapter 20. Revelation chapter 20. So I'm just giving you a brief understanding, all right? Revelation chapter 20. Maybe at chapter 19 first, all right? Chapter 19. Now, in chapter 19, verse 11. Now, and I saw heaven open, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he doth judge and make war, and so on and so on. Now, we know that this is Christ, all right? Verse 16, and he hath on his vesture, on his thigh, a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So this is the coming of Christ. Heaven open, coming of Christ. This is the visible second coming. Now, then judgment will begin on earth. Now, then in chapter 20, it says, and I saw an angel come down from heaven, having a key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand, and he laid hold on the dragon, the old serpent, which is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set seal upon him, that he should not deceive the nation, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that, he must be loosed for a season. So look up here. Scriptures is clear. In that second coming, Satan will be bound in the bottomless pit for 1,000 years. And he will not be let out. Look, it says, he will not be let out. And after the 1,000 years, he must be loosed a little season. So after the 1,000 years, he will be let loose for a little season. So he will be allowed to come up. Okay, so scriptures is clear. Now, not only that, if you look at chapter 20, verse 4, and I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw souls of them that were beheaded, and so on and so on. All right, and it says, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. So it says that after this, the saints will reign with Christ. So Christ's throne will be on earth. Christ will reign on earth. And I want you to notice that the word 1,000 years is repeated again in verse 4. 1,000 years. All right? And then it says, the rest of the dead live not again until 1,000 years were finished. In other words, the unbelievers, they remain unresurrected. All right? The dead, those that die then, they remain unresurrected. Now, then look at verse 6. Verse 5, there's 1,000 years. Then verse 6, it says, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Again, mention of the reigning on earth 1,000 years. Then verse 7, when the 1,000 years, can you see the repeated emphasis on 1,000 years on earth? Verse 7, and when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed, as God said earlier on in verse 3, correct? 1,000 years, he'll be allowed to come up. And verse 7, verse 8, and he shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters, and so on and so on. So he will be loosened and he will deceive the nations. All right? Deceive people, cause people to reject and turn against God. So this is what scriptures say. So this 1,000 years is called the millennium. All right? The millennium. Now, Presbyterians, by and large, they do not believe in a physical, literal 1,000 years of rule of Christ on earth. They interpret all this as, well, in a sense, figurative. Means it's just mentioned 1,000 years, that's all. It's not a literal 1,000 years, and just explaining how things will happen at that time. That is called millennialism. All right? Millennialism. Millennialism. No physical, literal 1,000 years of Christ's rule on earth. But Karl McIntyre, when he reads scripture, it's very clear. It's a literal 1,000 years. So he said, we hold on to the literal 1,000 years. So that is the second distinctive. Now, how can we be very sure this is correct? Now, I would say this. For increasingly, many Presbyterians are now increasingly moving towards believing in this literal millennialism. All right? One of the reasons is this. Because God says, at this point onwards, all right, Israel will be restored. Now, historically, many cannot believe that Israel will ever be restored. Because at this time, if you study with us the book of Isaiah, you will see God will use Israel, all right, as he intended. Israel will be restored. As God's nation, he will use Israel as he intended. But for a long time, people say, well, it's impossible. But we know how God restored Israel, and it was an impossible war. All right? All nations want to kick Israel out when it was reformed, but none of them could. All the nations around attacked. Israel was a new nation, but they repelled every single nation and successfully defeated all of them. It's nothing except a miracle of God because of his promise. So many began to say, hey, it is true. Israel is today a nation. All right? Still under chastisement. But they saw that. And many began to question whether their understanding was wrong. So we are millennialists. We believe in the millennial. Now we are pre-mill specifically. All right? Pre-mill. Christ comes before the millennium starts. So that's why we are pre-mill. All right? Mill means no millennium. Okay? Now, should we believe in this? Should we believe in this? So we are also pro-Israel. Means Israel is not replaced. Israel is not replaced by the church. The church is temporarily used of God to replace Israel. Temporary. Okay? Now, how do we know this is the correct interpretation? Now, first, the repeated use of 1,000 years, the description. And the second thing is this, 1,000 years where Satan is bound for 1,000 years. Now, our millennialists believe that this is the millennium. Means now, description of all those things is what is happening now. We are in that figurative millennium. All right? Now, can it be true that we are in this figurative millennium, so to speak? There is no literal 1,000 years. It cannot be true. Now, because if you turn to, please turn to, let me see which is a good verse. 1 Peter, let's use 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 5. All right, 1 Peter chapter 5. Now let us read together verse 8, 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. Now, God tells us, what is Satan the devil doing now? Look at verse 7, look at verse 8, it's very clear. Well, he walketh about. He walketh about. Now, if we are in millennium now, is Satan bound? Is Satan bound? Because if you are living in this period, then is Satan bound? No. So they interpret, well, Satan was bound when Christ died. No, God says he walks about. He walks about. So we are not living in that period where God says Satan is bound and he cannot deceive anyone. Please know that. He won't deceive anyone till that 1,000 years is over. God says so. He walketh about, seeking whom he may devour. He is actively tempting, trying to destroy Christians. Actively now. He is not bound. So now with that repeated use of 1,000, reign. All right? Are Christians reigning? No, we are not reigning. We are not ruling the earth, are we? Today, Christians are, even during the apostles' time and now, persecuted. The opposite is true. Unrighteousness, sin, rules the earth now. Today, when the Christians speak against sin, you get attacked, all right? You get in some countries, they get jailed. Are they ruling? Now, when this rule, you read about it, is a rule, all right? And you read the book of Isaiah, which you've been studying, it's the opposite to now. When men sin, it will immediately be revealed, all right? And God describes that during this period, there will be, the children will play with lions, snakes. Which one of you will bring your child to the zoo and tell your child, come, I toss you into the lion's den and play with the lion like a pet? All these things are not here. So when you read the book of Isaiah, you see we are not in the millennium. So our millennialism is incorrect. So Karl McIntyre said, well, we believe in the literal millennialism because of all these reasons, for example. Okay? So, now actually you read about the millennial, during the millennialism, during the 1,000 years from prophecies in the Old Testament, those that sin, all right, the unbelievers. You know what will happen during this time? You don't have time to turn to that, but you know your scriptures. Rain will fall on believers. Your neighbor who is an unbeliever won't receive rain. Do we see that here today? All right? No. So that is why the second thing is millennialism. Now, then there is the third distinctive. So this is the second, all right? This is second. Then the third distinctive. Look at your BBK books. The third distinctives. Now, OPC, now they allow social drinking. But Karl McIntyre believes that scriptures is clear about total abstinence. So if you want to join church membership, this is something that, well, you must believe in. Now the question is, why do we believe in that? I want to make this clear. It is not only unique to the Bible-Presbyterians to believe in total abstinence, all right? In Christendom, there are tons and tons of Christians and churches that totally believe in total abstinence because it is clear in scriptures. So please don't think this is just a Bible-Presbyterian belief. It is nothing new. All right? Christendom has always had two views about this, and many hold to total abstinence. So OPC say, well, social drinking, as long as you don't get drunk, it is fine. But Karl McIntyre disagrees. Now, we have covered a whole series on this, all right, in our church. So please go and review those YouTubes. If you can't find them, ask Brother Ichung. He will point you to the YouTube. We've covered this in great detail, why we believe in total abstinence. Okay? Now, so, actually why? Why do we believe in that? Now, one of the things that the Christian must realize clearly, that when the Bible, English Bible says wine, all right, we just use one word. But in Hebrew, in the Old Testament and Greek, there are different words, totally different words to describe what the English translators simply use as wine. So that's the first thing you must realize. And because times have changed to the point where most people associate the English word wine with only one thing that we see in the wine shops, contains alcohol, has alcohol in it. We associate wine, the English word wine in the Bible, as only one thing, what we see today. Now that is incorrect. That is incorrect. Please understand that, I'll show you for example, if I can get this working. Now, the word wine in the Bible, maybe I'll just show you dictionary definition. Dictionary.com. All right. What is the definition of a wine? All right, wine definition. Fermented juice of grapes made in many varieties, red wine, and so on, so on. So it can be fermented. In other words, there is alcoholic. There's alcohol in this drink, this beverage. So that is wine. But please also know that it is also defined as the juice, fermented or unfermented, of various fruits or plants used as a beverage or sauce. So please understand that the English word wine has the meaning of unfermented, means non-alcoholic juice, fruit juice as well. That is the English word. But today it is so common, so most dictionary, they do not even talk about this anymore. But some, they still do that. They still do that. It's just like today when some words have become so common and mainly associated with one thing. They will just define it as that. No point defining what the wine means in 1600, 1700. People are not interested. All right? But when the word wine was in the English word, it meant both kinds of drinks. So some trace dictionary definition. In the 1700s, it is described as grape juice as well, like here. 1800 is still described as non-fermented grape juice, all right? Express juice. Now, it's only in the recent times where they say no point mentioning this anymore. Now, one of the key reasons is this. You know, when you run a wine business, the government tax on wine is very different. And the government define what is wine. So the moment you are selling the wine today, there is a certain tax that you have to pay, okay? So now basically the term wine means to most people just one thing. So let me come back to this drawing. Just like in the Bible. Now, remember the King James Version, KJV, was translated because of Reformation and all that, in the about 1500, 1600, all right? The old Bibles, all right? 1500, 1600, that period. Now, up to 1700s, up to then, wine equals alcoholic beverage or juice. Up to then, all right? Even 1800s. So when the KJV translators use the word wine, they do not think twice. Maybe you ask, why don't they say different words? Because in the Hebrew Bible, wine, and in the Greek Bible, now it can also mean, alcoholic, all right, alcoholic, or non-alcoholic. All right, non-alcoholic. Now you say, why don't the King James translator use juice? For a simple reason. then when you use wine, people know it can mean either. It can mean either. All right? So, for example, today, if you use the word drugs, I always use this example, drugs. Now, you know that today, by definition, drug can be medicinal, pills, or liquid that you take, drugs. Go to the drug store. Then drugs can also mean contraband. All right, contraband kind of drugs. All right, whatever contraband drugs you have. All right. So when you use that, you know the same English word can mean two things, but you don't hesitate to use "I'm going to the drug store." All right. The doctors don't hesitate to say, you need to take some drugs, all right? You see the forms, drugs, written there on your medical form, for example. Why? Because it is understood. The context will tell you what it is. Because people know the context will tell you it is contraband or medical, they don't have to hesitate to use the word drugs. So back then, when they translated and used the word wine, they don't have to hesitate because context will tell you which kind of wine the Bible is referring to. What do I mean by context? For example, when you read the Bible, some parts of the Bible say, do not even look at the wine when it is turning color, all right? Proverbs 23. Don't even look at it. Now, what does it mean? Turning color means it's fermenting, it's moving, all right? The bubbling is occurring. Now, actually, let's turn to Proverbs 23:31. Proverbs 23:31. By the way, I'm just giving you an overview. If you view the video, I answer many frequently asked questions about wine and so on, and about the different words used in the Bible. All right? If you turn to Proverbs 23, verse 31, let's read together. Reading, look not thou upon the wine when it is red, when it giveth his color in the cup, when it moveth itself aright. Now this, even by today's wine producing manufacturers, they say, yes, this is the process of fermentation. So the Bible describes. So one hand, the Bible says, don't even look at wine. Don't even look at wine. And then on the other hand, you see in the book of Deuteronomy, Numbers, and so on, where God says, well, use your money to buy wine. Offer wine to me. That kind of thing. Now, you will have to think. On one hand, God says, well, wine is a deceiver. Wine is a serpent. Wine will kill you. That kind of thing. On the other hand, it says, please go and use money I give you to buy wine. Now, the context tells you whether this wine, this English word wine, which kind of wine it refers to. Just like today you say drugs. Just like the word gay today. It can be very different things. I won't be surprised one day this word will be only used for one meaning in dictionaries. Right? Doesn't mean that historically gay did not mean happy, joyful, merry. So context will tell you. Now, if you refuse to accept this, you refuse to accept and you say, in the Bible, there's only one kind of wine, there's only one kind, then you have to say God is confusing. If you say that in the Bible there's no such thing as non-alcoholic wine, then you say God is schizophrenic. One moment say, don't even look at it. Next moment say, please buy it and drink it. God, can you please make up your mind? Right? Just like you talk to your dad. Your dad says you're having a bad flu. I'm taking you to the drugstore. Wait, Dad, you told me not ever to take drugs. How can you even bring me to a drugstore? What's wrong with you, Dad? If drug only mean one thing to you, you say that. All right? So the Bible has both kinds. You cannot deny that. But today, now actually if you go to old Bible dictionaries, they do not argue that there are different kinds of wine. It is over time where Christians insist that wine, as long as you don't get drunk, it is fine. And we'll see those verses, God willing, afterwards. Now, so this is the history Up till then, it was always very clear, all right? 1800s and all that, the dictionaries mean that. Now, I want to show you a Bible verse, for example, that to prove to you the word wine in the Bible can mean a range, alcoholic as well as non-alcoholic by definition. So I've shown you the English dictionary. Now, in Acts chapter, all right, so here, Acts chapter 2, verse 13. If you turn to Acts chapter 2, verse 13 quickly. Acts chapter 2, verse 13. Now, you must not argue with language. You have to understand that. You cannot argue based on what Christians say and what people think. You have to argue based on what Scripture's language means. Acts chapter 2, verse 13. Now, shall we read Acts 2, 13? Acts chapter 2, verse 13 together. Reading. Others mocking said, "These men are full of new wine." These men are full of new wine. Okay? So, now, definitely it means that they were drunk. They thought that they were drunk, right? Well, how come they are speaking in things that we never heard before? It was another language foreign to them. So they thought they're drunk, just babbling. But they were speaking real languages. So they said these men must be full of new wine. Now, the word here, new wine, the English translator simply used the word wine because it can mean both things. Remember that. Now, to show you what is the meaning of this word, the Greek word here is glucose. You know where we get the English word glucose? Sugar. That has sugar content or something like that. But glucose is the Greek word, glucose. Now, what is the Bible dictionary's, Vine's expository dictionary? Please know, even Bible dictionaries make it clear. What is glucose? Glucose is sweet wine. Properly, must. And you know, must, even today, must can mean juice and can mean alcoholic must. So it means fresh juice. So it is clear that the Greek word for the English word wine here can mean fresh juice. It is never disputed. But when used of the more saccharine, means there is that sugar content in it, and you know sugar is what causes fermentation, all right, in the juices. Now, when there is more saccharine in it, there is fermentation causing, then it's highly inebriating, it becomes fermented wine. Fermented wine. So both can mean just fresh juice, or if the content is allowed to ferment, it will become, well, fermented wine, either non-fermented wine or fermented wine. It can mean both things. So here, when the people say, these people are full of new wine, they are meaning what? Context will tell you. They thought they were drunk. So they are referring to the one that has high saccharine, which causes fermentation. So context tells you. They won't be saying, these people are having glucose. Because glucose, fresh juice, will not make you drunk. They are talking about fermented wine. So even in the Bible, the very same Greek word can mean two things. Depends on the context. I'm just giving you one small example, all right? So please do not just read modern dictionaries, modern secular as well as Bible dictionaries say wine means only one thing. It is inaccurate, totally inaccurate. So that is one thing that we have to remember. Now, what about, so first and foremost, when God says don't drink, don't look, He's talking about fermented wine. When He says drink, buy, offer to me, it can only mean non-fermented drink. Now, turn to 1 Peter, please. 1 Peter. What about, well, I say, well, the Bible says as long as it's not in excess, it's fine, right? And then we end, all right? 1 Peter. All right? Now, let's read verse 3 and 4 together. For the time past, our life, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 3. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. Therefore, they think it strange that you run not with them to the excess of riot, speaking evil of you. So they say, look, the Bible says, as long as it is not excess, it's okay. Now, excess of wine is only one Greek word, all right, made out of the word wine, and the other part of the word, it means bubbling with, all right, bubbling with. Now, the Christian, if you interpret scriptures as only excess is a problem, then please look at verse 4. Then only abominable idolatries is a problem. Idolatries is no problem, only if it's abominable. Right? Then you have to interpret the scriptures like that. Bible says all idolatries are sin. Then you have to interpret, look at verse 4. You run not with them to the same excess of riot. Now, this excess is really too much. Excess of riot. Then you have to say that I can riot. I can live a riot life. As long as it is not excess. Would you interpret scriptures like that? If you want to interpret that excess of wine means you don't drink too much is fine, then you say don't have too much idolatry is fine. The good kind of idolatry, the non-abominable kind is fine. You can go and riot as long as it's not very bad kind of riot, it is fine. Then you have to interpret scriptures like that. Now, what is Peter saying here? He is simply saying that wine is basically bad. Idolatry is basically abominable. Riot is basically excess, the wrong kind, the unsafe behaviors of the unsaved. That is all. All right, so the adjective there is added there to describe these things are what sinners have in their life, not too much or too little. Too much idolatry, too little idolatry, fine. Too much rioting, not good. A little bit of rioting, okay. It's a description, adjectival description of what sinners, the unsaved, your old lifestyle was. All right, so these three things is why we are Bible Presbyterians. Let us pray.